Chun is actually how it's pronounced in Canada, but either or.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'm not picky.
So we got Washington State 9, right?
Yes.
So Washington State Congressional District number 9, which is like the southern metropolitan chunk of Seattle, right? From like Seattle down to Tacoma,
Yeah, and
right?
Bellevue, which is Microsoft HQ, and Renton, which is Boeing HQ, or used to be. Right?
So some pretty important players in your district.
Yeah.
From that aspect. So first of all, thanks for coming into the studio and coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate you welcoming someone that's a political nobody to have a voice, and hopefully can support you all as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we can get you to more than just a political nobody, right? We gotta change that thinking. Think big. So,
what?
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, the idea, and this is what I was hoping to initially push in my campaign too, but it's perhaps a little too technical. Is we have in the military something called change of command. It's the same thing that I have out at sea on every ship I've stepped on. So we mentor people who are younger and smarter than us, hopefully, to take over jobs that, in my case, is like multi-billion-dollar operation of transporting cargo in and out of ports around the world. And if I can do that with an 18 to 24-year-old, I don't see why people that are looking to be our political leadership cannot do that in mentoring the next generation of leaders in our country. So I want to be a trendsetter and start that, and I'm working with other grassroots candidates around the country to do that. And half of them are ex-military as well. And, we're just sick of seeing the same people that caused all the problems that our country is facing, telling us that they're the ones with all the answers and all the solutions.
Right. And then I definitely want to get into that a little bit more. But first of all, I want to mention you're on the Republican ticket.
Yes.
Right. Which, first, can you tell us why that isn't crazy in the Seattle area? Because at least around the country, they're going to go, you're in the Seattle area and you're running on the Republican ticket. What are you thinking?
Yeah, and people think that wherever you are in the country, it's like if you're out in the countryside, it's deep blue. It's deep red, or if you're in an urban center or coastal elite city, you're deep blue. And that is really more of a fundraising strategy for both parties in the duopoly. But it's not crazy because literally I've been door knocking for 8 months. I've been talking to people in the public. I've been going around to all these urban centers, and really everyone is more not Republican, not Democrat, but they're more human being.
Yeah.
They're more American and really independent. And especially this part of the country, people are independent thinkers, and most people are highly educated and have a lot of opinions and thoughts that they formed over their years of development. And people are not so attached to an ideology as the media is trying to tell people that they are. And people just want to see folks that are good people, that have American interest, that the interest of their community at heart, and
interest in the community as opposed to interest of the oligarchy, right?
Yeah. Or even that. And one of the things I'm running on is unity. It's probably my main platform. Unity, accountability, and truth is my slogan. And when I approach people, first of all, I apologize because I'm taking their time, and I tell them that I'm going to talk about politics, which is the one thing that we're not supposed to talk about, allegedly. And when I approach them, I tell them that I, like you, am sick of all the division and infighting in our country, and seeing families split apart and communities split apart, and people not talking to their neighbors over something that is inconsequential as political persuasion. And it's not like we're pushing towards, like, we're literally going in the direction of a civil war, which I do is crazy, because when people that are running for politics and are political animals tell us, like, we want to fight the Democrats, we want to fight the Republicans, I'm like, who are you going to fight? My wife? My wife is a Democrat.
Right.
You're going to fight her? Like,
yeah.
Like, I'm not going to commit war and aggression against our neighbors, but I feel it's very easy for political animals to get fundraising along those lines. Like, literally, the long-term strategy for one party or another is to tell people, like, you don't want to support the Republicans because they're all racist neo-Nazis. And
right.
I mean,
and you don't want to support the Democrats because they're all crazy social justice warrior Marxists.
Yeah.
So give us money.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, being the obvious neo-Nazi that I am.
Yes,
clearly.
I thought
it was time to do something about this division, and I spent years embedded in our government, both as a military officer and in the Merchant Marines, although with the Merchant Marines, it's both private and government, but really seeing how our supply chain system works, and trying to advise people about policies and solutions, pushing white papers that will bring the country together. And it fell on deaf ears. Our congressman was definitely not interested in it, and even as a veteran, I approached him from that angle. Like,
and you're talking about the congressman for that's in the seat
in Washington 9 that I'm running against.
Okay, got it.
25-year incumbent. He literally got there like 2 years out of college.
Yeah,
did like very little work as like a junior prosecutor, and then was anointed to higher office. And I look at that and I'm like, gosh, man, if people out of college his age can do that, like I can definitely find a collegiate that is smarter than me, and I can brief them on everything they need to know to run for office. And that's what I record on my social media and my YouTube channel. Like, this is how you run for office. This is what you do. This is what you file. And I'm hoping to create like a cookie cutter process for other people that are younger than 50 to run and hopefully be the change that we all want to see. And so I talked about these solutions that were ignored by folks in office, and I propose my policies, which are all bipartisan. I don't know who in their right mind would fight against something like right to repair. Like, my car literally broke down yesterday, and one of the things my local mechanic could not do was look into fixing the system because it's proprietary technology by the auto company. And it's like, I thought if we bought something, we owned it.
Right. So you're saying like he can't get in there and dig into it, or he can't get a manual about it because he's not allowed to read about how the thing actually works because it's proprietary.
Yeah. You and I kind of grew up during like the tail end of Radio Shack, and I remember when we used to get toys and stuff, like, this is how you fix it. This is like, like we probably still remember what cathode ray tubes are, and they'll probably be going away. But it's really not that different, like getting a soldering kit and fixing something. But the issue is, even though you bought something and you own it, like a Peloton, for instance, you still have to subscribe to a service just in order to get the thing that you bought. $3,000, exercise equipment fixed. And it's the easiest way that the people that are big in the movement talk about it is they talk about cell phones and how, if you crack your screen, that's really like under an $80 repair. Yeah. But most likely you're going to be told to send it to an authorized Apple repair shop. And there's some pretty horrific incidents of authorized Apple people at these corporate headquarters that have literally like hacked into young women's phones, took their private photos, and then had the access via their phones to log into those young women's social media and publish those photos, making it seem like it was the young women themselves
doing it herself.
Yeah. So, I mean, this whole like insidious culture of making people think that there's some kind of anointed fellow at the top of the orthodoxy, whether it's a scientist or authorized repairman or a politician that has all the answers for us, is the complete opposite direction of what I'm trying to tell people in my political campaign. I'm telling people, like, look, I am a subject matter expert in the military. I come from a very unique logistic and supply chain maritime background. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. Background is one of the things first thing I wanted to talk to you about. So go ahead and you're just about to dive into your background. Please fully dive into your background. Okay.
Yes.
Oh gosh, I guess I should have opened with this.
No, you're fine. Just tell us.
So it could go back pretty far because I am a 6th generation American on my mom's side. Yeah. But I guess one of the biggest influences in my immediate family's life is that my family escaped from the People's Republic of China. My dad literally swam to Hong Kong during the tail end of the Cultural Revolution. He spent 4.5 hours in the water. And it's not like, he just went to the beach one day and just decided to swim to an island across the water. They couldn't go directly there. You can literally not leave your village, even cross the street without getting a passport stamped going from one town to another. So him and millions of others escaped during the dead of night, climbing mountain jungles, rife with tigers and swimming in shark-infested waters. Yeah. And not all of the people that he left with, he tried 3 times to escape, not all the people that he left with made it. And they used to have trawling nets for fishing in Hong Kong that would just be awash with human bodies.
For other people trying to escape.
But, Hong Kong was a free city at the time. he didn't stop there. He kept coming to the U.S. for a reason. And I tell people that reason that he told us is because we are the only nation on earth that decided our founding doctrine would be based on upholding the rights of the individual over the rights of a state.
Mm-hmm.
Literally what I was talking about earlier, like the rights of people who have anointed themselves and said they are science or God's gift to us, and therefore we should listen to everything that they tell us because they know better than
They're
us.
the authority.
Yeah.
We just listen to the authorities, yeah.
And they can live our lives better than we can live our lives. They can raise our children better than we can raise our children is what they're telling people. I'm telling people the opposite. Like, no, these people at the Hill, look, they're really good at telling you what you want to hear. And basically from everything that I grew up, from my parents telling me about like what it was like living in authoritarian China, and literally like every publication that they came out was the party line, was the government line. It wasn't just that the government itself was controlling the people. They mobilized people to police their own neighbors.
Which was this in every communist country they did that. Like
almost
everybody was a spy. I mean, I don't know if almost everybody, even if it's 1 in 5 or 1 in 10.
And
like,
if you weren't,
don't know.
if you weren't a spy, you were going to be guilty of being accused as a spy because, oh, my neighbor such and such is not reporting, such and such, and then like they are brought in and they're questioned. So they're putting people in a constant state of fear, and then it even extended to the point where they talked about concepts such as like generational sin and guilt by association. Mm-hmm. So, okay, maybe that person isn't reporting anybody, but you didn't report that person and you live next door to them. So you're also guilty of
gulag,
your thought crime. Yeah. So, when you put a society in that state of fear and division, there's no question how far people will go to protect their families and their loved ones. Because I know, like, you and I, young children, like, we would do anything for our children. So you can't even guilt people at some times because they themselves are victims. And that's why I don't see someone, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, left or right, as my enemy. I say one team, one dream, one America, because that's what I was taught by my father. Like, you come here and you can criticize the president, you can criticize your elected officials and not fear repercussions because of what you have to say. Although nowadays that seems to be changing very quickly.
Changing very quickly, yeah.
At a very micro level, but it never starts out like, well, the past 20 months might be something unique, but it generally does not start out with like them coming down with the hammer and sickle and telling you like, this is the way that you will run your lives. And these are the people that have all the utopian solutions for us. But I am basically just trying to push the same message that's in our Constitution. Look, the utopian solution is to empower every individual, every citizen in this country to have more liberty to exercise the freedoms that are protected by our Constitution and just the American way of life. And I can go into ad nauseum, I guess, from all the places I've been in the world. I think I wrote down on my website and my literature that I've been to over 30 different countries, and I've been to every single state in this union. I've lived in those states for a time. I've also traveled to most of our territories. I've probably been more than 30 countries. You honestly lose track.
You lose track,
at some point after 10 years shipping around. And then in between those shipping assignments, I made my own adventure and would go on road trips across North America, up into Canada, Quebec, British Columbia, and come back down and just see the Grand Canyon, see all the wonders that we have in our country. And we are unique. Even the places that people hear about on the news that maybe they haven't actually been to themselves, look, those places are not the havens that you think they are. If you disagree with me, go to Australia now. Go to Canada now.
Go to Austria now. Yeah.
Yes. And see like the kind of lives that people are living. Even places that are seen as epitomes of culture like Italy and France. And I was stationed in Italy, and I sailed by the beaches in Normandy, and my younger brother was in France as well. He's like, yeah, they've got a lot of racial problems. Like, people think that the U.S. is bad. Well, I mean, they literally segregate different ethnicities of their population, and they also have socioeconomic problems compounding on that. But it's kind of the same thing that I saw visiting my ancestral shrines in China as well. Like, it didn't matter if someone who was an Uyghur was working very hard as a peanut vendor so that they could save up so that their child could go to school in the southern province and it's a good college in China. Like even if they could even get in there, and they, someone at that level probably like should be leading something in the world. Their son or daughter is going to end up as a peanut vendor
because they're an
best.
Uyghur.
Because they're a minority in that country.
Hard time pronouncing it. Uyghur?
Uyghur Muslim.
Yeah.
And it's horrific, by the way, the genocide that is being orchestrated there, and how complicit that the rest of the world has become in kind of the new messaging that's being pushed out as solutions. So, one of the big things that I'm talking about is environmental solutions that actually work and help with the planet. And I know you with a chemistry background,
we could talk about it. Yeah.
We might have some contention, but I think we can both agree if there is a problem, the solution to it is not to get people fighting against each other. And I tell people, look, the way we approach emergencies and problems out at sea, because our ships in the Merchant Marines, they have about like 20 to 25 people. Those giant shipping container ships or oil tankers or liquid natural gas ships or break bulk carriers, they have about like 20, 25 people. Every single person on that vessel is of critical importance, whether they're a oiler and wiper or deckhand or in the stewards department. We are constantly training everybody on emergency scenarios and how to respond. If a fire breaks out on the ship, if there's pirates, we don't go like, oh my gosh, is this a man-made fire or is this a naturally occurring fire?
You just
is this
put the fire out.
Is there a fire that naturally occurs? Like, we just put it out, literally.
And then, could you tell us a little bit more about the Merchant Marine? Because we were talking about your background, and I don't want to derail you, but I just want to make sure that we get where you're coming from, because you spent a lot of time in the military, in the Merchant Marine, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
I went to the United States Merchant Marine Academy, which is a trade school, and I transferred there from Rutgers University. And I say I transferred, but to get into to get into a service academy, and there's only 5 in our country: West Point, Annapolis, U.S. Coast Guard Academy, Air Force Academy, and the Merchant Marine Academy, which a lot of people have forgotten about because our industry has been so divested from in the American psyche, and also outside interest and people that are looking to get kickbacks from foreign donors, basically. There's only 5 service academies in the country, and they maintain basically the economic and the defense backbone of our country. The Merchant Marines is not explicitly a defense force, but we are the only service academy with a battle standard. You are more likely to die during World War II as a Merchant Marine than you were as a GI standing on the beaches of Normandy.
Wow.
And it was a horrific, because not only that, and you hear stories of the men who sailed the Liberty ships, and they were integrated, by the way. That's what a lot of people don't know. Like, even before the military was integrated, the Merchant Marines was integrated. Going back into the 1800s, before the founding of our country,
Interesting.
You had African-American ship captains that owned huge entrepreneurial enterprises. But I digress from Nantucket history. Thank you for focusing me, because I'm a history nerd, so I go off on the tangents, unfortunately.
So back to your background. Merchant Marine.
So graduated from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, which is a trade school, after leaving Rutgers University. I was fortunate enough to be nominated by my congressman and selected as a blue collar family. Like, we grew up pretty poor community in Atlantic City, and I literally was one of those kids that was working at a takeout and dine-in restaurant in a ghetto. But after graduating, I spent 10 years in the Merchant Marines, and literally, like, from day one that you join the Merchant Marine Academy, you are learning about how the global supply chain works. You're learning how to tie knots and how to navigate, and things like as complicated as celestial navigation and machine welding to
tying knots.
Yeah, tying knots. Like,
it's pretty complicated.
It can be pretty complicated too.
Yeah.
And for me, like, trying to remember how to tie a bosun's chair, for instance, and hang off the side and paint and chip. It's something else. But in that global supply chain, which is a blue collar trade, and people can make a good living doing these trade jobs, and folks have no idea about that. Even though I did receive a bachelor's degree in logistics and intermodal transportation from there. But more importantly, my bread and butter is I received a licensure that is approved by the U.S. Coast Guard as a deck officer of limited tonnage on any oceans. And from my time there, I worked on everything from like liquid natural gas tankers, delivering literally like the historic second load of liquid natural gas to the country of Argentina. They had something called a regasification vessel, where we pick up liquid natural gas from the Caribbean or maybe Houston, and we ship it out to a country, and we are literally like a mobile supply terminal. So you can regasify this natural gas, which has been compressed 300 times, and power a country that does not have the infrastructure for it, as long as it has
that sitting in the port, and then the next one comes in and they can
and it's
that's
really
interesting. I had no idea that was how to handle it.
It's transformational technology, and liquid natural gas should have been the way that, and natural gas in general should be the way that we're developing, because not only does it drastically reduce emissions from coal fire plants, which have a 50-year lifespan, but these things can be scrapped, rebuilt, modular, moved around the world. You can pull into a port of any impoverished nation and instantly give them power to last months, maybe a year at some point, depending on what their needs are. And it's really
is the ship, the power plant, like is the ship generating the energy too, or it's just giving the gas to the power plant that's more local?
It can, but it's more efficient for the design of the ship that I was on for it to pass the liquid natural gas to
the local power plant,
to a local power plant, or to regasify and push the natural gas to a local power plant, which, it was functioning both as a terminal and as the power plant as well. It's pretty interesting stuff. But this was years old. Like, this was in 2007, and at that time, it's still proprietary technology, but it's still pretty old at that time, because this stuff has been around for decades.
Yes.
And look, the reason global shipping is important is not just because people won't be getting their gifts on Black Friday and
their Walmart stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's not just, that you can cheaply supply things for economies of scale, paying people in sweatshops and literally slave labor in Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia and the rest of Tibet and People's Republic of China on the mainland, paying slaves nothing and, working them until they're ready to have their organs farmed, to work, to build our solar panels or whatever our plastic trinkets are and toys of the day. We only have 180 deep draft vessels in the U.S. Merchant Marine fleet left, and that's down from 220 when
deep draft vessels.
Yeah, so these are vessels that can carry a lot of cargo, basically.
Okay.
So if you're thinking of something like the Washington State ferries or tug and barge or even fishing vessels, those of us in the Merchant Marines, we consider them our brothers and sisters too. They're our family. They're also sailors, and most of them are probably represented by the same unions that we are. And I can get into the union issue as well. But those tugs and barges, they cannot carry anywhere near the tonnage of a big cargo supply ship like an oil tanker or a container ship with 50,000 TEUs or 20-foot equivalent units. So basically those 20 and 40-foot containers that you see stacked outside of SeaTac port, they can't carry that much of those. Now, to give you an idea, that 180 is to 220, down from 220 when I graduated in 2010.
Yeah.
That is less than most major maritime corporations have in their fleet. And this is our entire national fleet. So that's the extent to which the U.S. Merchant Marine has been sold out basically since the 1980s. And it's been a slow crawl towards automation and outsourcing, basically, to the point where you'll have ports where there used to be shipyards in Philadelphia, and now they're just scrap yards, and they're not owned by U.S. corporations. They're owned by the Dutch, or they're owned by Arab countries. And literally, you have to think, like, for instance, the company that I just quit for, or I quit my day job to run for office, much like you, because I felt, our voices of our generation needed to come out and say something, because if not now, when, and if not us, who? And I got that from a gentleman who was running in California named Larry Elder, who I have a lot of respect for what he did to try and push solutions. But you know, man, I completely went off the tangent.
So we were talking about the Merchant Marine.
Yeah.
And how the number of draft ships, I believe you
deep
call
draft
them,
vessels,
deep draft vessels has been declining. You were pointing out that there were multiple ports that have they used to be American
foreign ownership,
and now they have foreign ownership. So what I'd interject here real quick. So I want to make sure I understand what the issue is. Are you saying that the issue here is that the total number of ships coming down and going from 220 to 180? I mean that's a huge percentage. And particularly if these ships are so large, are you lamenting the fact that the merchant marine is getting smaller, or are you lamenting the fact that the productive capacity of the U.S. appears to be selling out to foreigners?
Both, but really to break it down to common Americans who might be hearing the term merchant marine for the first time, like each one of those ships is probably like 50 cents on the dollar at current inflation rates for what it costs for us to buy anything. And if you look at everything that's produced in this country, we are an import-heavy nation.
Correct.
We've been exporting our industrial supply manufacturing base since the most favored nation status was granted to the totalitarian regime of China, essentially. And it's not that we don't have partners in other countries that are free nations. It's just that, there's this whole management culture of selling people out, and it's permeated into every asset of our society.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason U.S. flagships matter from a defense perspective, for instance, like I worked for a company called Military Sealift Command until I quit in order to run for office because DOD, and I also resigned my active duty status and reaffiliated with the reserves for the same reason, to run for office because of the Hatch Act, and I want to do right by whatever organization that I'm representing. Nuclear armaments, explosive munitions, groceries to our troops around the world.
This is all transferred.
It's all transferred by Military Sealift Command gray hull vessels. They are merchant marines, but they are gray hull because they're owned by the Department of the Navy and by this extension, the Department of Defense. Also, our fuel that's used to supply our aircraft carriers and everything from JP5 to diesel is carried on these Military Sealift Command vessels as well.
And JP5 is what?
JP5 jet fuel.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Yep.
They used to do other special missions like pull in spaceship parts from the rockets that used to be launched on our missions to the ISS. But it's since over the years been more and more privatized and moved away from government control, and then on the grander scale been moved away from American control. So we do have something called the Jones Act, which ironically, it's been attacked bipartisanly by both Republicans and Democrats as something that we need to get rid of to make America successful. So for instance, when Puerto Rico was hit by the hurricanes, they keep talking about like, oh, we have all these goods on foreign ships that could go into Puerto Rico, but we can't bring them in because of the Jones Act.
Yeah.
That is not true. Like, one of our union halls is down in Puerto Rico. There were plenty of goods in the port, but the infrastructure of the island, I'm talking about like electricity and roads, was devastated, so you couldn't get them out of the port. So it's not shipping. But why do our elected officials on both sides of the aisle want to get rid of this?
Because they'll benefit if they do.
Yes. Lobbying, basically, corporate kickbacks, and we can bemoan that as much as we want, but I think your viewership already knows that they're all on the same team. And which is why we're doing this now.
And then that actually leads me to the next question I wanted to ask is, if you're elected, what's the most important thing or things on your legislative agenda?
So all of my policies are very similar.
Okay.
They all empower individuals.
Okay.
I'm running on a platform of improving the environment, the American economy, and also healthcare for American people, because those are the things that our constituency, our fellow citizens in this area care about. But the way that you fix these things is all, in my mind, from the science that I've been reading, because I also have a master's in environmental policy, and I've been studying Nobel economists like Eleanor Ostrom, the only woman in history. She's an American to win the Nobel Prize in economics. And she and other scientists like her basically laid it out for us. And, because they have solutions, politicians ignore them because politicians
they
make
like
problems.
Yeah.
Which they can then claim to fix by creating more problems. But these solutions empower Americans by giving people, individual citizens, finally to have a tax break to do things that we all would like to do and, would actually help our communities and build social capital. Instead of giving a tax break to a big corporation or something, tell an individual tax-paying American, we're going to cut your taxes by,
a lot.
Yeah, let's say a lot.
50%.
Well, I mean,
100%. Cut them. I hate taxes.
I wouldn't be opposed to that, and we'll see what folks on the Hill. But my idea was to set a spending limit. So first, people have to actually use this amount of money. Let's say $500, but they can cut up to $3,000, and maybe it can go even further. I mean, because nowadays we're just printing trillions on end. But you can cut people's taxes if they invest in things like growing their own garden, doing their own aquaponics, investing in their home infrastructure to have something like a microgrid.
So you're basically saying use not using the taxes, but using the relief of taxes as an incentive.
Yes.
For becoming self-sufficient, more self-sufficient. And
it's not so much the policy, but it's the idea and forcing it on the House floor, like something else I mentioned, or like right to repair.
Yeah.
Forcing those ideas on the House floor and see who is going to vote for them and who is going to vote against them.
Yeah.
And that will, step one, expose the people that are patriots and the people that are only doing this to keep their job.
Regardless of what side of the aisle they're on.
Yes.
Right. That's a very good point.
And long-term goal is to also build social capital, and it's not really that long-term.
Tell us what you mean by social capital.
So social capital is it's something that it's hard to describe over a short-term interview, but it's basically like the utility of return off of being a good citizen in your community, in your neighborhood, of being a good parent. These things are hard to measure in terms of fiscal capital.
Right, because you can't put a dollar sign on it so easily.
Yeah.
Right.
But they definitely have a value. You see from social media, and this is my hardest constituency to reach, is not people in Seattle who are hard blue and, whatever the right-leaning conservative channels are saying folks out here are. My hardest people to reach are people that literally are busy. They live in high-rise apartments, and maybe there's a guard at the gate and there's the check-in. Like, I can't physically go and talk
get past
to them.
Yeah.
People that I talk to, like when I'm interjecting them outside of a grocery store or a gym or knocking on doors or just literally, like, I'll be going to bars and doing I'm at Cosmic Bottles this Friday and doing stand-up, are not people that I can't meet. The people that are hardest to reach are the people that are disconnected because they're living off of social media, or their reality is
they have no social capital.
Yes,
in that sense,
essentially, because they're busy, and I understand, and we have got to find a way to talk to people like that and integrate them into our communities. Another idea I had going off of this tax release idea, and this is not something that will be joined; it's going to be separate. Ideally, if it's my bill that's passed, is to give people a physical fitness incentive. Because everybody right now is worried about the pandemic and whatever.
But no one's talking about how to develop your immune system.
Yeah, nobody's talking about healthcare. Well, if you give people a physical fitness incentive, you make it $1,000 per individual, maybe $2,000 per joint filing couple, and $3,000 if they have children. And for children, like, it could be as easy as like making sure that they go to gym class and that their teacher stamps that they have X number of exercise days a year, and same for people that might be wearing Fitbits or going to their community gyms. If you know you're going to get a tax reduction for signing up with a gym and interacting with people in your community,
it's kind of bastardizing it to say it this way, but I'm going to get paid to go to the gym.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep more of my money if I go to the gym is the proper way to say it. But
it doesn't have to be a gym. It could be like a yoga instructor,
or whatever it is. I get paid for doing it as opposed to saying, "Oh man, this is taking time and it's taking money out of my pocket."
Yeah.
Right.
And the beauty of this is because I've run it by a lot of Main Street accountant shops that I've gone by have given me the A-OK as like it being a brilliant idea is you don't really need to increase, like you don't need to create these crazy ginormous government programs and pass omnibills to do something like this. They're like, yeah, something like this came down with the Obamacare initiative where they just created a new form and now people have to fill out. So for accountants that are Main Street and they're telling me like, yeah, it'll just be a new form. And because a lot of these places already have to file an EIN to declare themselves as that type of business, you're empowering local entrepreneurs too. Like, why not have someone who is a local yoga or fitness instructor or maybe does like Pilates or, some of that
CrossFit or something.
Insane CrossFit, Ironman stuff. Like, why not give that person the leverage to now be a community builder and increase social capital? So these things are invisible. They're not impossible to build social capital. I mean, it's like, it's not like currency. It's not money. It's an invisible utility of being a citizen, essentially. It can be increased through creative policies that empower people, but you can't really force this from top down. Like if the government comes down, like everybody just put on a mask now regardless and have it like
because we said so.
Because we said so. That doesn't sound quite as convincing as like, hey, if you do this, it's not even like carrot and stick stuff. It's just basic governance. And you see how like countries around the world that did things, or even states, and probably shouldn't mention them to get too political, but you see how Taiwan, for instance, as a country, handled the pandemic through initiating essentially what was like a huge public relations campaign. We went the opposite direction and we adopted the Chinese Communist Party's approach. In fact, the incumbent politician who I'm running against, he said that the Chinese Communist Party did an excellent job of handling the pandemic, let alone the fact that like, hey, these folks literally unleashed this thing. And I'm not talking.
Well, and then I got to interrupt this. Anything that comes out of the media apparatus from a communist country is fake.
Yes.
Like, how stupid do you have to be to not to not know that? Like, give me a break. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. I had to interject that.
Yeah. And given his position, even though he's never served a day in his life, he's the chairman of the Armed Services Committee.
Yeah.
He's also on the Transportation and Infrastructure Board, which is holding a boot over the leadership of unions. Union leadership's next, which is why unions cannot back me, because they literally told me like, look, we're maritime unions, we're federal. If we support you, and I'm hopefully I'm not doxing any of them, but if we support you, there's just going to be backlash because this guy is on the Transportation and Infrastructure Board, and we have to say he's a friend of labor.
Talk about that more. I think that's a very important point to bring up. Is that
there's a disconnect with unions between rank and file unions. Like I'm a 10-year union member. Our sister union is the Longshoremen's Association of America. There's ILA and ILWA. I worked alongside them for years doing night work. And these people, they make really good bank, but they work their ass off for it and they deserve to be paid for it. And that also goes into the supply chain crisis issue. But because the Merchant Marines has shrunk so much, because American Maritime has shrunk so much, because there's so many controlling interests at ports and so many backlogs. Like, I'd like to go into this terminal. Oh, but this terminal is owned by this corporation, and they're not going to open it up. It's not really the Port Authority that's managing it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then the way the labor is structured, basically union leadership has to be very careful about who in our political apparatus they befriend and who they offend, because every negative decision that has come out of the Hill over the past decade of my career, I have immediately felt an impact in my career in the Merchant Marines. I can talk about the moratorium on drilling in the Gulf and how that was a really bad idea from the previous presidential administrations, because basically all that did is not just punish the bad actors in the Gulf of Mexico that were working with the U.S., but it punished all the good actors as well.
Right.
And it moved those businesses overseas to this day. And the oil and gas industry is not something that you just stop and start. Once that business is moved overseas,
it's over there.
The infrastructure has to be developed over there. It is over there.
Uh-huh.
So that was something.
And then the infrastructure here starts to decay. You can't just move it back.
Yeah, I felt that immediately. I was like, oh, all right, yeah, I finally got my license, and now I can have a more of a responsible role in things, and I'm no longer just chipping and painting, and I can finally, all our jobs are gone.
Yeah.
Now, and that's what originally pushed me to do more, because I graduated from a U.S. Service Academy. We incur an 8-year service obligation in the reserves. We can also do 3 years active duty. I chose to have both a civilian and a military career, so I went in the reserves. So it pushed me to do more things in the reserves and expose the military world to me, which I'm very grateful to the Navy for. And I would encourage young people to look into service in any capacity, whether it's in uniform service or something like the Peace Corps, because it's definitely a force multiplier in your life. But
going back to the economy here.
Yeah, I went back to work.
Well, and then actually, no, you finish. But talk about the unions. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so basically that, like, there's a disconnect between union leadership and union rank and file. And
what sort of backlash would these unions that if they're saying they want to support you but they can't openly because this other guy has the boot over their neck, what sort of backlash do you think they would face?
It depends on what policy is being pushed and how it has to do. Like, they could attack the Jones Act again for basically.
So you're saying, oh, hey, union member, you're not supporting me. I'm going to go attack the Jones Act because if that Jones Act goes away, you're toast.
This is not unique to maritime unions as well, but it is a sample, a prescience for what is to come for the rest of organized labor. And I hope folks are waking up to this, the disconnect between rank and file unions, those of us that join the unions expecting that the unions will protect our jobs, and then finding out that we have the right to lose our employment for misinformation, and then being asked as younger union members to take over all these openings that are suddenly available, for instance, on Washington State Ferry.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, I didn't join a union to scab my brothers and sisters. And I imagine people that are in the healthcare field, because I know from my wife's experience as a healthcare worker and seeing like 10 COVID patients a day, basically, how it's so similar. And if we dig into the rabbit hole of corruption, it goes pretty deep. But I'm telling people that the way you fight it is you give everybody rights that are enforced by Congress and our Constitution, and actually put enforcement mechanisms in there, empowering people.
Yeah, let's kind of step back and kind of draw a circle around what you've said so far. So first of all, the economy.
Yeah,
we talked about taxes, and you see the possibility of utilizing taxes or tax reduction as an incentive to say, okay, we want you to do this. This is good for you, so let's put a tax incentive on that.
It's good for everyone.
Well, it's good for everyone, and I think that's mostly what taxes are right now. But they're incentivized in the other direction, right? So you want to turn that around, and then on the greater economic scale, is that you really want to focus on making sure that the manufacturing and the jobs stay in the United States. Was that the message I was getting?
It is, but people have to realize that those jobs, many of them are gone. So before we started this, I was talking about coffins, how they're made overseas, even though the wood is grown right here in the Pacific Northwest. And I was talking to lumberjacks that I come across all kinds of people. We have a very unique community out here, and I hope people are getting out more and meeting your neighbors. But the wood that is good wood, that might be old growth, for instance, that is harvestable sustainably, is sent overseas to be worked on in China and sent back here and sold to us. Meanwhile, we're closing mills here in the States. So yes, many of those jobs are gone, but we're seeing now, for instance, like with Made in America, and this is a trend that's been going on for a long time too, that what is going on overseas is not sustainable. It is sustainable if you want to continually propagate genocide around the world. But I don't think as Americans that we want to do that. I think Americans are willing to pay a premium to have things made here by Americans.
Well, and then, sorry to interrupt, is that even if there is a premium,
yes,
because if it's being made by Americans and there's more Americans making money, there's more money to pay for that premium.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can tailor the tax incentives that I mentioned as well to target people that, okay, you have to spend locally within your own state or your own community. And again, like, yes, we're cutting taxes, so that will be a deficit on the federal budget. But if you have more economic activity from people finally spending money where they want to spend it, you know, maybe supporting a local grower, maybe becoming a local grower and entrepreneur themselves. I was talking to a lady who said is a microgreen grower, and she's told me that she's Democrat, over 65, never voted for a Republican, but asked how she could help me in my campaign. She's like, your ideas are fresh, and it's not about left or right. It's about solutions, and she liked what I had to offer. I mean, granted, she's a microgreen grower, so there's an incentive, but she is also literally the target people that I want to support.
Well, and then that brings up a good
as
point
a grower
here,
myself,
because, you know, say you have the 60-year-old lady, she's been voting Democrat her whole life, and there's this image being thrown out of Republicans that these old, white, grizzled, more than likely racist dudes that just are totally out of touch with reality and just want to line their own pockets, and that's not entirely untrue.
Yeah,
it's not entirely untrue. I mean, I know we have this wave of people coming into the Republican Party or getting involved on the Republican side of things that aren't that, and they go, I am totally not that, and I hate that too.
Yeah.
And the label's still getting thrown at them, and they hate that, but it's not entirely untrue, like I just said. So I'm assuming that this 60-year-old woman is going, oh my God, here's someone who's not that, and he's standing right in front of me. Yeah.
And you know what? None of those, I think the Republicans call them rhinos, are going, or Republicans in name only, are going out and introducing themselves. And look, let's be honest, the federal and presidential level, we've had some pretty bad representation of both parties on both sides. And I think those of us in our generation recognize that. And that's generally something that I'll tell people, like, well, what do you think of Mitch McConnell, and what do you think of the Bush? Well, I'm not a Bush Republican because I have friends that died in the Middle East. I'll tell you that. And you know, I would have supported us withdrawing in 2010, but my congressman, the guy I'm running against, was against us withdrawing in 2010. He was also against supporting the troops in 2008 with the surge that was needed to finish, you know, the crisis at the time. But he also voted for too big to fail and all the corporate bailouts last year instead of
which is the exact same thing the neoliberals do. So what's the difference?
Yeah, it's like he's a Democrat, and the funny thing is, I've seen publications, and full disclosure, I mostly read left wing stuff.
Yeah,
that to me it really feels a lot like propaganda nowadays. But
I would say because it is. But
my field of interest is the environment and ancient cultures and traditional healing and stuff like that, and history. And some of these publications talk about that a lot, and also subscribe to right wing think tanks and look at their policies. But the left wing stuff talks about the congressman that I'm running against as being a progressive. What exactly is progressive about him? Is it progressive to see people
wait,
living...
I got to interrupt. So the left-wing stuff, after all that thing I just said about the old white guys being racist and all that
and
stuff,
they say this year after year.
The left-wing publication are supporting this Republican congressman for being progressive.
Yeah. Well, the irony, too, is the right-wing publications are saying that these folks that are rampantly spending of our federal treasures, basically stealing from my children and your children's generation, that was stolen from our generation, are conservative. Like, no, these people are both plutocrats that are corrupt, and they're political animals. They're on the same side. They're not on our side, which is the side of the American people. And I think it's high pastime for new faces in the Democratic and Republican side to show something different to what people like us want to see. And a caveat to that, though, is the Democrats did not want me challenging their 25-year incumbent.
Because he's a friggin' Democrat.
But the factions, the factionalism within the Democratic Party that was willing to support me, basically like, here are the policies that you are going to run on. And I was like, whoa. I'm running on things that are going to unite people, that are solutions, that are bipartisan.
Wait, the Democrats gave you something to say this is what you're going to run on, even though you're running under the Republican ticket?
People in the Democratic apparatus. And people in the Republican apparatus, to their credit, completely ignore me. the elites, but they will at least let me say my part. And I will say, like, having met people on the ground, PCOs in both the Democrat and Republican side, it's the same people. These are grassroots people that are good people that just want the best for our country, and they just happen to have a D or R next to their name.
Yeah.
And those are the people that I want to reach. Like, look, I don't care if you affiliate with this party or other. We have an open primary in this state. Okay.
Right.
I just hope that you can recognize that I am someone that has your interest in mind, just like my family's interest in mind. And I feel like that gets across to everybody, because I've been door knocking and pounding pavements for 8 months now. I really had like no bad interactions. I have had 7.
You haven't run into any Antifa or anything yet? They don't come out of the basement?
No, I mean, like, aren't I the demographic that they're looking to support? Like, my community was devastated by the pandemic.
Well, what are we talking about? Antifa, or are we talking about?
Well, I'm just talking.
I was making a joke about Antifa. We don't need to talk about them.
Well, I'm talking about people on. No, I mean, and this should be talked about because, King County, for instance, they came out with a sustainable action plan, and there was an open forum, and I was the only minority in that forum, and the only one with an environmental science background.
Yep.
A lot of them were retired softies or tech folks. And I merely asked the question that it seems like all the solutions you're proposing are like, make Elon Musk rich, buy foreign-made solar panels by slave labor, and force everybody to do this or that. I was like, okay, do you have any plans that don't punish people that are just trying to get by and make a living in life? Like, how about doing something like I talked about, like our tax incentives, instantly remove me from that online forum before they part 2 of the question. Yes, they kicked me out, and I shared it on my social media. I'm like, wow, literally, like, the breath before I made my comment, you were saying traditional, underprivileged, underrepresented communities.
Which you are.
Which I am, which if you look at the International District in 12th and Jackson right now, they are suffering the epidemic of homelessness pretty bad right now. And it's been that way for the longest time, even pre-pandemic, but it's exploded now. Literally, you have to fight past campers of folks. And those folks that are in those campers, I talk to them too. They're human beings. They're not happy with the situation of the local leadership either. But you literally have to fight past them to go talk to these business owners. And folks are terrified.
So before we jump over into the homelessness,
it's a depressing topic.
Discussion. I wanted to go back to this forum or whatever that you were on, this panel, whatever it was. So, and we might be broaching into the subject of environmentalism now, but I am under the opinion that people like these, and I don't know anything about the individuals that were on this panel, but they're coming out saying, okay, blah, blah, blah environment, therefore make Elon Musk rich, and then use slave labor in China to create solar panels, and, we need to dig more lithium strip mining.
They don't want to talk about that.
But they don't want to talk about that, but I think, and then you point out, nobody there is in the demographic that they're praising. Right, whether or not they should be this or that demographic, they're saying,
but they're looking for us.
They want my face. They're looking for you.
They don't want my message. They don't want me to cognitively think differently.
And what they're proposing, I would argue, isn't environmentally useful at all.
No,
not in the least little bit. So if they don't want who they say they want, and they don't actually want environmental solutions, then it's clearly environment is not what they're there for.
I mean, if you Google lithium strip mines, and look at areas in the world where those have been enacted, it's on par, if not worse, than mountaintop removal for coal mine harvesting. Probably worse because the environmental devastation will last for many decades longer. If you Google a Tesla charging station in a rain flood, in an area that might not have proper drainage. That
like
is
around here. There's quite a few places like that around here. Yeah,
I've seen pictures. Like, okay, I don't want to be in a charging station that is flooded, and I don't think most people that are sensible either. Because yes, it will conduct.
Yeah.
But there's other alternatives that have been around for the longest time. That I can go into, like hydrogen, Gen 4 nuclear, micronuclear.
And then let's actually bring this up because I think this is important. So we were having some talking before we clicked on the record button.
Yeah.
About the nature of CO2, and we got a little confused between carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
But because at the beginning you were mentioning, okay, if we're on a boat, there's a fire, we don't talk about where the fire came from. We just put the fire out, right? And I would argue that CO2, carbon dioxide.
I'm on ships though. I'm not on boats. Sorry. Sorry. But yeah,
the non-military, non-sailor guy here got the Navy terms wrong. Sorry. My dad was a sailor though.
Yeah, I remember. I ribbon you because I remember.
Yeah. But now I lost my train of thought. Yeah.
No, sorry.
I'm making the argument that CO2 is not a fire that needs to be put out. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't other harmful chemicals. I'm saying CO2 isn't one of them, and I wanted to start an environmental conversation from there and see where you stand.
Well, for my focus of my research, it was mostly on abatement strategies and environmental remediation.
Mm-hmm.
There's, for instance, there's a guy known as the Forest Man of India, and this guy literally day by day was transferring little saplings that he grew in his house, everything.
I have a kid's book about this.
Well, he's a real
my
dude.
Wife got one from the library. I think I know the story.
And over a span of a very short amount of time, he literally grew a jungle.
Which is awesome.
And that there are forestation projects that are being enacted across the world. Like there's the Great Green Wall Initiative of Sub-Saharan Africa, where they're looking to fight the encroachment of the desert by grassifying, and then the CCP kind of stole it and are trying to make it their own thing in the Mongolian region.
Yeah.
But, either or, like, the idea is that you can grow a forest, like human beings can do this. Now, this is not new. Our ancestors, ancient civilizations, via anthropological research, have shown to have been doing this as well. If you look at something, that's more recent that people can easily look up, like it's called a Satoyama, Satomaya, for any people listening. It's basically like a strategy that both benefits the environment and the human environment, because people are not separate. Our economy is not separate from nature. We are part of nature, and that's kind of how Eastern philosophy looks at things.
Wouldn't the hippies jump up and down and yell permaculture at this point?
Yeah. Well, is that because you saw that on my policies? No, I'm a big permaculture proponent.
No, I mean, I'm not some
But,
some big right-leaning conservative.
No, and honestly, no one out here in the Pacific Northwest is really a big right-leaning conservative. I would argue they're not even rampant, what is it, like Antifa commies. They just don't know what they're backing.
I've ran into some rampant Antifa commies, so they're here. I'm just not. They're not the people that
I'd like to meet with them,
day-to-day.
and I'd like to talk with them, and hopefully.
I don't recommend it.
Okay.
I tried that and ended up with paint on the side of my head.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I mean, there are crazies. I did mention 7 bad interactions. I will say those 7 were not all with
with it.
2 of them were with people who I believe were Republicans. So there is validity what you were saying, like old white folks running things.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's true on both sides. Let's just say that. We literally.
Not that I have anything wrong with white people. I want to. I want to emphasize that.
Likewise,
I'm just saying that. There is this motif.
Yeah, some
about
of my
the
best
Republican
friends
Party.
are white people. So sorry. I love. But I digress. So, but you see in the research, side-by-side comparisons of places where there have been human activity purposely orchestrated to amplify the natural environment and expand biomes, compared with places that were just left as preserves to their own devices in the wild. And you see actually the places with human activity
as better,
that worked alongside as by far better, and to the level that it's, increases that we don't even really know yet, because there hasn't been much science to study what are the amplifying effects of human activity. Because ironically, when these systems become so efficient, they become self-sufficient, literally food forest.
Yep.
And they get neglected because the next generation inherits the work of their predecessors and are benefactors to it, and they forget those techniques and they go into decay.
And then you got to do it again.
And then you got to do it again and learn it again. And that's kind of what I feel is like a stage we are in our civilization now, because industrial agriculture is not the methodology we want to go. And subtracting from sugar subsidies was one of the things that I was thinking that we could easily use to fund the physical fitness incentive. It's a sidetrack, but talking about CO2 or CO pollution or emission pollution, basically from combustion engines. Number one, there are so many places where efficiency can be increased. So in the oil and gas industry, we have these things that are suppressed by inert gas, and we have like vapor runoff and vapor burn-off.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am picking up cargo that is a petrol in liquid form or even solid form, and we're moving from an area that is cooler to an area that is warmer,
mm-hmm.
like for instance, picking up Louisiana and moving around the Florida Everglades and the Keys to Florida where it's warm, you have thermal expansion.
Yep.
And that could literally explode the ship. So we have vapor burn off. We literally like at terminals when we're discharging as well, you have vaporization as well. And if you put cameras in ships and you see like lightning rods flying around everywhere, but there's no explosion because there's an inert gas system.
Mm-hmm.
But this vapor, it's not connected to like a Stirling heat pump or an engine that can reuse it. It's literally like just burnt off and wasted.
So now, are you talking about it is burnt, or you're saying that the methane or the propane or whatever?
It is burnt. It's just burnt so that it doesn't collect in the
and
area.
Just to let you know, I do have the chemistry background. I also used to work at an oil refinery.
Yeah.
As a lab tech. So I'm pretty familiar with petroleum myself, and we had a flare at the refinery where it was constantly burning, and then there was regular waste that you sent there, and it was also an emergency thing, like if something went wrong with the refinery, and you're like, oh my God, we got all this gas, it's about to explode, send it to the flare!
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I sailed
like
past
that, right?
I sailed past a number of those.
Yeah.
Most of them were overseas. So think about the wildest stories you remember from your days working in oil and gas. It is
hydrofluoric acid leaks.
Yeah. It is wild, wild west overseas in the Arabian Gulf, even places like Trinidad and Tobago, and even with liquid natural gas, which is so dangerous. And this is why people are so professional in the field, because nobody wants to die.
Yeah. No, I mean, we're kind of getting sidetracked here, but at the refinery, in order for you to walk into a unit, you needed a permit from the person in charge. Like, you couldn't even set foot in that unit without a permit because safety was such a huge deal and everybody had to know what was going on. Yeah. I think I know where you're going, where in these other countries, there ain't none of that.
Yeah,
right.
Let alone things like gas sniffers or like, confined space entry permits or hot work permits. There's a level of that on paper, but look,
just go out and do it. No one's watching.
There are countries overseas in the Arabian Gulf that use slave labor. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Those people are the sniffers.
Send him in and see if he dies, sort of thing.
I mean, if it comes down to it, the efficiency.
We can't afford H2S and CO detectors, so send him in there and see if he keels over.
Well, they can probably afford it.
Yeah.
But the management culture is not there.
Or we don't care, I guess, is a better...
We don't care is a better analogy. People that came aboard that were longshore in foreign ships, like a lot of times they'd ask us for simple things like, can I have a bottle of water? Or can I have a T-shirt? Literally, clothes are falling apart.
Yeah.
And
you're like, sure.
Sure. But here's the problem. Once you give it to one person, like everybody there
needs one. Yeah.
And, ship of like 20 guys and we're wearing like pretty ragtag worn clothes in general, which is why like a lot of merchant sailors are involved in kind of like self-run nonprofit
because
they don't declare anything. But before they go on a ship, they'll have like trash bags full of like shoes or something that they picked up from their home church or whatever. And then when they know they're going to go in a port somewhere overseas in the developing world, U.S. sailors will give people stuff if they need it.
Well, and then we're getting a little sidetracked because I got excited about petroleum refining.
But I'm sorry. I feel like I completely lost track of your question.
So we started talking about environmentalism, and we started with CO2, and I want to go back there, but not yet. You got into managing forests and growing forests versus letting nature do it, and the point that you wanted to make was, I think, that human beings have a beneficial effect on nature if done correctly.
Yes.
And the prevailing environment, and this is in contrast to the prevailing environmental wisdom, which is if you touched it, you screwed it up.
Yeah,
right?
it's misanthropy,
Yeah.
and they basically are coming from this philosophy, and we could go into Malthusian ethics and how they talk about something called tragedy of the commons, which literally the Nobel economist that I named earlier,
Yeah.
she disproved that like you can have people that detriment an area, but you can also have people that benefit an area,
And you have to do this one and not that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really that simple. And the other thing, like research shows, like 2.5 tons of carbon are siphoned per acre out of the atmosphere just from having something grow on soil that is not naked.
Let's talk about carbon. That's what I wanted to get at. So, my original question was, I don't
Cool.
see carbon. What did you say? Cool or
Cool,
coal?
cool.
Oh, okay, cool.
Cool.
I was
Sorry.
like coal. I thought yes, that's carbon, but so carbon dioxide is usually the carbon everybody's referring to,
Yes.
and carbon monoxide is deadly, and I don't want methane sprouting in the atmosphere,
Yeah.
or all the various things that oil includes. Although nature is pretty good at cleaning up oil by itself. That's something I learned somewhat recently. Is that CO2 by itself? If we approach it from classifying it as a pollutant when it's actually part of the life cycle of the Earth.
Yes.
We've already run into a problem because if one side's saying, hey, this is a fire, and the other side's saying, wait, no, that's not a fire, that's the thing, like helping everybody. I want to be clear where you're at on identifying the CO2 and what it is, because I am of the persuasion that, and this came around originating in the 70s from the Club of Rome. I don't know if you've heard of it, which Al Gore was a part of, that we want to create pollution as the enemy of humanity, because that makes them their own enemy, because they're the ones creating the pollution. And carbon dioxide was the perfect thing, because everything we do emits carbon dioxide. Like right now, we're emitting carbon dioxide just from breathing, right? And our cars emit carbon dioxide.
Yes.
Everything we do emits carbon dioxide.
But being carbon-based life forms.
Yeah, we're carbon-based life forms.
Yeah.
So to demonize carbon dioxide automatically demonizes what we are and everything that we do, and that to say, okay, because it's something that needs to be regulated, now that is a way for government to get into every single aspect of our lives.
Yes.
And so I'm of the opinion of just forget the carbon dioxide thing, because it's not a pollutant. There are pollutants, but that's not one of them. So I wanted to hear your response to that.
So I'm going to make a point, and hopefully I don't get sidetracked in it. And this is why I'm running too, because I was trying to tell people about this stuff. So when I come across a divisive issue, like what to classify as carbon dioxide,
is it a pollutant or not? Yeah,
I basically use the same approach I'm using to address everything on my Unity platform. I ignore it completely because I don't think it's important to debate over the semantics. But the people that do want us debating over semantics are the lawyer politicians. They're not the people with the solutions. My analysis of it is, with the CO2 and greenhouse gas issue, they realized during the acid rain crisis and our depleting ozone that certain things like sulfur dioxide and hydrofluorocarbons, which are still being used, were causing irreparable, that they thought at the time, damage to our environment. And they found that, even though we were politicians, we kind of fixed this up or cleaned it up, kind of. Go into that. But because they realized that, like, they could do this thing, it actually worked, and they could actually show people that even though we are politicians, we fix this thing. They're kind of using that as the basis of, like, this is how we'll fix the next thing. And this is why we can fix the next thing, because our policies that we created, solve the ozone crisis. What I'm telling people is that these folks on the Hill, maybe they got this thing right with the ozone, but they're not inherently problem solvers. The people that are inherently problem solvers are your mechanic, plumbers, farmers, electricians, people that literally solve, merchant marines, people that literally solve issues for a living, tradespeople, normal working Americans. And those are the people that we should have on the Hill addressing our issues and solving our problems, rather than these people that are professionally educated, literally, like when you get your Juris Doctorate and you study in the legal background, they look at doctrine and they interpret it and they administrate that doctrine, literally studying for 4 years to become a professional bureaucrat.
Right.
Those are not the people
that need to be solving
that
how much
going to fix anything. Yeah.
What the parts per million of this thing should be in the water or whatever, right?
And we have to study navigation law, maritime law, admiralty law, whatever you call it. We have something called the 72 coal regs internationally, rules of the road domestically here in the U.S. And as a maritime officer, we have to study these. So I do have some exposure to a legal background to see like how lawyers and politicians think. And the 2 classes and the 2 instructors that I had on this, they're like, semantics matter. What you tell people matters. How you frame an issue matters.
Mm-hmm.
And, you either shall do something, you shall steer this, you shall have steerage this way, or you can have steerage this way. Like all those little phrasing matter, which is what we see. Like if you extrapolate that to the legal profession as a whole, and I have friends that are lawyers as well, even though I don't want any of them representing me.
Yeah.
They'll tell you like, how you represent your clients in the courtroom, it also matters. So when you see all these political hot button topics, or you see these phrases that politicians focus on, I guess, I've been geared to think a certain way from my parents' upbringing, escaping communism. Like people are arguing over this stupid phrasing, or like, calling the CCP virus, the Wuhan virus,
or not
coronavirus, COVID-19, Omicron or whatever. That matters. That matters in how you frame things, and it matters in how you can divide people along certain lines and get them to behave a certain way.
Well, and then I
have a lot to say about the naming of the virus too.
Well, I want to go back to because again CO2, because it's a big issue.
Yeah.
Because a lot of bad stuff is being rolled out on it, and
yes.
one of the things are you familiar with ESG? Environmental, social, and governance for corporate stuff for corporations.
Is that like basically the boilerplate language that all corporations are using to frame their public relations, being green? And
so I think it's a step beyond that. So first of all, it's emanating from the World Economic Forum, which is
I'm familiar with that.
Klaus Schwab,
who's
has none of our best interests at heart. And the idea behind it is, okay, we want such and such totalitarian government on Earth. And let's just take the United States, for example. Yeah. We want it in the United States. It's really hard to achieve that through law because of the way that the government is set up. So why don't we try to achieve that through the corporations? And so this ESG comes out, and I mean, this is stuff where vaccine passports can roll in, where carbon credits can roll in, where you have the wrong political views, so you're going to get fired, or you're not getting promoted, or whatever. All that can roll in under this ESG, which is outside of law. And I know that the CO2 topic is the main thing propelling this, because the carbon in the atmosphere, we need
the new boogeyman.
We need to end civilization now because there's carbon in the atmosphere. So what I want to ask you is that, so I see this, and I think this is accurate, that the CO2 question, because it's been framed in as this pollutant for so many years, is really being used to drive not only from the government side of things, but also the corporate side of things, of bringing in more and more totalitarian CCP style stuff. And I wanted to know how you would address that.
I agree with that 100%. And this was before you hit the record button too, but this is why I was talking, like, I'm the only candidate running that probably knows what central bank digital currency is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably the only one that's a huge proponent of supporting the crypto independence and lobbying for crypto independence here in the U.S. and avoiding something like a government-controlled central bank digital currency, even like a corporate digital currency like the Facebook's Libra or whatever they're trying to rebrand it as now.
Which I think fell flat on its face.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Yeah. Up. The Zucker.
Yeah. Good. Anyway.
But shoot. Lost my... But
we
Yes,
were talking about addressing.
I have heard of the
different-
World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
I was very surprised, actually, in a recent speech by our current president when he cited them as an authentic source, because I don't think there's really any economist on the World Economic Forum. It seems to be just a forum of people who are very wealthy and have a lot of means, and then are pushing their ideas, which spell trouble for those of us in the working class.
So spell trouble for like 99% of the population, but yes.
Yeah. Well, the issue is that the people that might be inclined to support what they are proposing think that it will benefit them, and they think it will benefit the world as well, until
it
like
doesn't
with
benefit
communism,
them anymore.
It comes back, and with a vengeance, and generally they are among the first classes to be eliminated. These people,
because they were part of the revolution, so they know how to make a revolution. So get rid of that person because we don't want a counter revolution, basically.
Yeah, you saw this with the Cultural Revolution in China. Like, they used school children, like my father, who was growing up then, to attack their own parents, to attack their school teachers, to attack their neighbors, because that was the right thing to do, because those people represented the evils, the four old evils of ways of doing the things to the world that were polluting and were not woke and did not understand their class privilege and the privileges they grew up in. So these children had to be the ones to lead Mao's revolution, because it was the right thing to do. And then they all got forced into communes afterwards, because you have this revolutionary body of people that essentially believe they are doing the right thing. And when the reality sneaks up on them, and it's not a quick coming thing, and they're like, hey, how come we can't talk to our families anymore? We can't talk to our neighbors anymore. We aren't getting along over these very simple things. And like, this isn't right. When that by the time a lot of folks woke up to that, and
it was too late.
They started rebelling. It was too late, and then they were crushed by the same system, the people that they helped propagate. And literally, it's the same thing here. Like, maybe not to as dystopian a level yet, because when I hear about Christian stories of the Bible, and I remember the stories of my parents' upbringing, it's like pretty similar in terms of hellscapes.
Yeah.
But literally, they were shown pictures of newspapers where people were dead, across, and they didn't know that it was domestic. But like, this is how America is, and this are the people suffering around the world. When really,
when that was their backyard,
it was it was their own community, and yeah. So these people that mean well are going to be the ones that unfortunately suffer the most from it, and they will have to live with that. And that's why I'm trying to bring them, because I don't see them as enemies. They are victims just as much as the rest of us will be under these people that are at the top, that are our political establishment, that are in our institutions, in our academia, and telling us, like, we have all the solutions because we have X, Y, and Z flair on our jackets and our stars, or we have these many titles behind our name. Like, no, like, I talk to working class people because of the nature of my work, and you have as well. And I've met some pretty bright people that aren't formally educated, and like, wow, this person knows a lot of stuff and should be running things, but probably nobody will give them the time of day.
And they don't have the leadership skills to
or
go after it themselves,
or the wisdom they've accumulated. Is an untraditional setting, like
right.
So
just to finish, I wanted
for politicians. I mean, untraditional for politicians,
right?
Yeah.
Going back to and again, so CO2 is just kind of the thing that we have on the table that we're looking at.
That's the boogeyman that they're using to push this World Economic Forum stuff,
or wherever else that it's coming from.
Yeah.
As someone who would be on the Hill, how do you see yourself addressing boogeyman issues that are used to take rights away from the populace and weaken the country?
I'd be completely opposed to them.
Yeah,
clearly. And the way you dispel it is literally telling people, okay, if CO2 is really that big of an issue, and I believe it could be, it could not be, but this is how you fix it. 2.5 tons of CO2 will be siphoned by telling people,
plant more trees.
I mean, it goes beyond that. Like, literally, grassland will siphon that. So if you have trees, that's a 3D grow structure. You could grow things that trellis along the trees, bean stalks. And it could be perennial stuff that every year dies, and that carbon, you could just mulch it into the soil, and now you're keeping the carbon in the soil. You can use stuff like biochar. I do some kind of crazy like kombucha, effective microorganism bokashi stuff. Probably not what
I've heard of all that. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not what folks that are pushing all of this buy solar panels, buy electric vehicles stuff are pushing. But you know what? All of their measurements for what these carbon credits are being based off, I had to go through them over my graduate course of education either. Those calculators are highly inaccurate. You know,
of course they are.
They're not going to be measuring someone like me who's trying to implement like basically a zero waste solution.
Yeah.
Which is what we do in the Merchant Marines too. Like there's MARPOL acts. We can't just throw plastic off the side of the ships. We separate our trash. Believe it or not, like those roughnecks, those blue collar workers, even though Hollywood is showing them as being like terrible polluters, a lot of those folks are super environmentally conscious.
They like the environment.
Yeah.
They
love the environment.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are hunters. Well, I mean, like hunters, fishers, but they want to provide stewardship to the oceans and to waterways and to the environment because they want to grow up and fish with their daughters and
they want to keep it clean. I mean, you want to go out
we
in a
all
boat
want
and not
clean air, clean water,
not go through a bunch of garbage.
Yeah,
right.
So
for sure. I want to keep it moving because we're
pressed for time.
Well, we're not pressed for time, but it's getting long. Tell me a little bit about healthcare.
So again, very divisive issue. You either hear the Medicare for all thing or completely private thing. I don't think most people that are pushing the Medicare for all understand that in some of these Dutch countries, like the Netherlands, for instance, there is no public healthcare. It's all private. It's just costs are kept low because of transparency. So that's kind of what I'm building off of.
I think you should repeat that. Costs are kept low because of transparency.
Yes. So my idea, and this will probably lose me a lot of corporate donors. Sorry, we're on a shoestring budget as it is. But my wife, who has worked in the healthcare field for the longest time, and she woke me up to a lot of this because being young and healthy as we are, it was not something that I originally worried about before I was 25 and then 35.
Yeah.
But now having children, it's different. But people walking into a healthcare facility like a hospital should be faced with a billboard. And I've seen this in other places in the world. It says, okay, if you get an x-ray, it's going to cost this much.
It's $120.
If you get a shot, it's going to cost this much. If it costs more than that, well, then your brain is going to start thinking like, why am I being charged $25,000 for a rabies shot because I got bit by a raccoon? And literally, I know the manufacturing cost is less than $19.
What did you do for this money? That's what people realize.
Yes.
Like, how did this bill happen? I
That's
just
a real
stayed in
story,
bed
by
for.
the way.
Yeah, I believe it. I just stayed in bed for 4 hours. Like,
yes.
How is this $25,000? Yeah.
And that there's many books people can read about all the middlemen involved in the process and the incentivation process. Like insurance companies get like a 15% kickback. So if it's a higher charge, then their kickback is greater. Same for certain elective procedures and even some mandatory procedures. So hospitals, pre-pandemic I'm talking about, their number one and number two earners were surgeries, and number two is radiology or x-rays, imaging, mammography, MRIs. And because it was a business-making model, American healthcare is not designed to give us good health. It's designed to make money. It's a business. And you had things that ICU beds that were kept low because they don't generate profit.
Right.
Yeah. To the same level that a surgery.
Well, and I want to nitpick our semantics and nuance here.
Yeah.
We can have a business that can make money.
Yes.
That's designed to keep people healthy.
Yeah.
It's just the incentives are perverse.
Yes.
Right now. I think that's an important distinction.
You're right. And,
yeah.
I'm a bad politician because I'm not good with semantics and playing with language. It's like, dang you lawyers.
I'm here to keep you.
But the idea is if you can create an environment of price transparency, and that makes you think too. So if I can force something like this on the House floor, or, and again, I mentioned the earlier, I don't remember if we were recording, but Benicio Garcia.
Say it again. Whatever.
Yeah. Benicio Garcia running in Washington 4, I'm running a campaign with him. He's also a grassroots guy. There's a lady out in Virginia and a gentleman out in Florida who I are also grassroots. And there's like a dozen people in Congress already whose families also escaped totalitarian regimes, who I know would support this, would support pushing legislation,
to at least get it on the floor.
Yeah, pushing price transparency. Now, who among our elected officials is going to vote against that?
The ones that don't benefit.
More than right to repair is going to show like who's on the side of the American people.
Well, and
if you're left or right, this is not a left or right issue.
Yeah, I want to know how much it's going to cost to do something. And to harp on that point, so I interviewed recently a state representative from North Dakota.
Yeah, I watched that. Was awesome.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. So you know what it is. I'll repeat it a little bit here for someone who may not have watched it yet. Is he brought to the state floor a resolution that said parents are primary stakeholders over their children's future in education, as opposed to the state, because we had this whole thing with the Virginia gubernatorial election where the incumbent came out and said, well, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should be teaching their children, and everybody went, excuse me, what? And so he brings us to the floor, and it got unanimous voting, and he said in the interview that I knew that there were some people who didn't want to vote against it, but they knew better not. There were some people who wanted to vote against it, but they knew better not to because they didn't want to be seen voting against it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a very powerful move where either you get them to vote for it, and great, you got it, or you smoke them out and say, okay, here's the guy who won't vote for price transparency regardless of what side of the aisle they're on.
And, folks that might have friends that are left-leaning, and I would even challenge looking to camera one, challenge my left-leaning opponents, adopt my policies, okay? Yeah. Then I won't have to run. I won't have to become a politician. I'm looking to implement change of command, not to goad my own ego. So if you adopt policies and you want to work with me to put, I'm an open door. I'll talk to anybody that is willing to listen and give me the time of day to do things that will improve the lives of Americans.
Let me ask you this, because we just brought it up. Who do you think is the primary stakeholder in a child's future?
Parents, obviously. That's ourselves.
How about this? Would you bring that resolution to the federal floor?
Yes, definitely.
I think that'd be pretty cool if that would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we saw with the pandemic as well, and this can go into the union issue, because I have a lot of friends that were teachers. I wanted to be a teacher myself, to be honest, but came ashore in 2016 and was like, all right, finally on shore duty. Now I can work on my master's degree. I want to be maybe a high school teacher or something.
Yeah.
And oh my God, what? 330 million people, and people are arguing over these folks. I've worked with people that are way more amazing than the choices that we have for leadership. And I was like, okay, well, what is something that everybody wants? Clean air, clean water. Let me study the environment. I can bring people together on this topic alone. So, I still have aspirations to go into professional education one day, because working in heavy industry, you're always training people. Same within the military, you're always, whether it's in the field or in a classroom setting, you're always providing training to folks. You're always an educator. I thought being a blue collar trade worker that school would stop. It just never ends. School never ends. But I enjoy it now, and I enjoy what I'm teaching. But yes, we saw through the pandemic, though, the real disconnect, though, because I have friends who are teachers, and they wanted to be teaching their students. They did not want kids to be gaining 15 pounds on average, which is the average American child gained 15 pounds over
pandemic. This crap. Yeah.
Yeah. And being locked up and being told not to go play at playgrounds. There were caution tapes around our playgrounds.
This is a pet peeve semantic for me. Can we call it the lockdowns and not the pandemic?
The lockdowns.
The pandemic didn't do any of that. Yeah. The lockdowns did.
Exactly. You're right. You're 100%. The lockdowns did that. Our government did that to us, and we let our government do that to us, unfortunately. And, that's why folks like you and me are standing up now.
Right.
But is the primary role of the unions to represent the teachers? Because I feel like now, for instance, the very powerful teachers unions, they're not even controlled by the teachers in the union. they're controlled by
some external force.
The leadership. No, well, maybe external, maybe internal to the union itself, but the people who work their way up as politicians within the union to become the upper echelon of the union, their parents are superintendents or what have you. And they're making fat checks at the expense of my friends who are working on $40,000 a year salaries, doing, most important work of educating the next generation. And then over the pandemic, they're doing it virtually. So what is the difference between that and having your kids watch Khan Academy or some kind of educational profile?
All the stuff that's available online. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think your guest from North Dakota spelled everything out pretty clearly for folks. And when I saw that, I was like, yes, this is everything that parents like myself are feeling. Like, if this is the way it's going to go, then, why can't we look at ways at alternative education? Because I work with people in the Navy that are fresh out of high school. And a lot of people think that, only people who are dumb go into the military. Well, I don't know. I challenge them to take the ASVAB test themselves and see where
I was
going to
say, the military buys all the smartest people up, right?
Yeah, if we can. And a lot of times they're from underprivileged communities like my own, underprivileged families. And that's why I'm very grateful to what this country offers our people, regardless of whatever race or gender you are. The opportunities and the privileges that travel the world. But so these kids coming to me out of high school, they've telling me I had a lot of friends that wanted to join and they took the ASVAB with me and they failed miserably. And it was and I know why, because back in high school, we weren't even learning everything that we needed to learn. They basically were just giving everybody a pass, even if you weren't good in algebra or if you weren't good on English or the stems.
Basic math. Yeah.
So we got to go in a new direction. And going back to our aged political leadership, our people that should be collecting a Social Security check and mentoring the next generation of leaders, the people that are going to be most connected with what these young people that will be the leaders of our society in one way or another, that will be inheriting the future, are they going to be connected with this kid that just got out of high school when they haven't been in high school for 6 decades or something like that?
Yeah.
They're still thinking you got to wear your varsity jacket and it's nerds versus jocks. Whereas when we grew up, you had to be the well-rounded model citizen, and you had to be good at both academics, sports, and involved in your community in order to even have a dream of going to college. You had to be that perfect, well-rounded. So those cliques, I'm sure they exist in some places, but I mean, what we see on the media is not representative of reality, as you well know, and that's why you're doing this. Power to you.
Thank you. A power to you as well. I mean, that's what I wanted you to hear. I got one more thing to ask you before we wrap up. Mandates, vaccine passports, vaccine requirements, mask mandates, all that sort of stuff. Where do you land?
So I don't like that Omicron passed the Xi variant, but
Omicron.
In Cantonese, it's pronounced Womigong.
Yeah,
which means I defeat communism or I oppose communism.
Omicron is pronounced that way.
Yes,
that's awesome. That's awesome. I love the Omicron variant now.
I don't know. I don't know if the World Health Organization ran it by their ownership.
Yeah.
But they inadvertently shot themselves in the foot by skipping the Xi variant.
Right.
Anyway, but we'll
Xi
see.
Variant.
Yeah.
I took ancient Greek in college too. Xi is how.
Well, I'm Xi Jinping is the leader of the CCP.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah. But yes, completely opposed to mandates. And so the 25-year incumbent I'm running across, he said, Communist China did such a great job of handling the pandemic. And like you said,
look, all the news is fake.
I was watching on independent Chinese media, people being locked in their homes, buried alive, some people burned alive. Because, there's a number of reasons.
Burned alive because a fire started and they couldn't leave because they weren't allowed to leave?
No, because they had the pandemic. And there's
guys with flamethrowers or
buried and burned.
Oh,
yes.
goddamn.
It's pretty horrific.
Yeah.
I mean, that and being buried alive, like, I don't know. If you're going to bury me alive, maybe burn me first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'll
Yeah.
fair. Or like people trapped in boxes
Yeah.
with no air holes and then like dumped. This is what they did to contain this disease because it is extra deadly on mainland China as well because the pollution there is rampant. Because again, industry does not have the same controls overseas that we enforce here domestically.
Correct.
Which is why it is a very good idea for us to support our oil and gas and industry interest here domestically. Like in Island County, they unfortunately closed those 2 refineries, but I guarantee you those refineries are probably world class.
Wait! They just closed 2 refineries up north?
Yeah, a couple months ago. I think it was like October.
You mean in Anacortes?
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty.
I worked at one of the ones up in Ferndale. So we only have 2 refineries up here now instead of 4.
If it was 4, I went to 2.
This is oh my
So
god! We closed 2 refineries.
I got this in oil and gas, and I'm like, okay, well, this is going to impact gas prices, one, but it's also going to impact everything else because if you're
all the people who work there,
yes.
all the businesses that service that place.
Yes, and it's
but what
the increase in gasoline prices is going to impact all working class Americans, the communities that folks that are our elected representatives are saying that they want to help are the ones that will be hurt the most. They're also going to push business overseas to our authoritarian competitors in this industry because it is an industry. Whether you like fossil fuels or not, they're going to be around for a while. Like these clothes probably have nylon fiber in them, same as this material. Getting rid of shopping bags is not going to fix anything. It's more like a cosmetic issue. Yeah. It's just like slapping a green label on food in the grocery store does not mean it's actually
food.
Permaculture grown or grown by local growers.
And I want to throw a side thing in here. Sorry to interrupt you again. I don't actually believe oil is made out of fossils, but we could save that discussion for another time. Please continue.
Yeah, I was looking at that stuff too. Yeah. It's interesting. But I don't know. The sun is pretty powerful, but either or, it doesn't really matter in terms of how I want to approach the issue.
Right.
By fixing
it was a pet peeve that I just had to.
But I have looked at what you're talking about. Like, there's a compelling argument for it. But yeah, like pushing all of our domestic industrial base overseas is not good. Okay. Even places that are being lauded in the national media as like being green and environmental, you want to see what Canada does with its oil manufacturing, and the tar sands compared to what is done in the American Gulf and North Dakota. Like it's
night and day.
Yeah, it's night and day. And things are more rampant in places that are supposedly like there's a reason that there's only one developed country in the world that from 2017 to 2019, as far I haven't been looking at 2020 figures yet because I've been doing this stuff. But like 2017 to 2019, there's only one developed country in the world that reversed emissions to approach the original goals, not of the Paris Agreement, but the Kyoto Protocols decades earlier. It's the USA. And we weren't even signatory to the United Nations Conventions. And,
everybody says it's so bad here and that we're the worst pollutants. And like I said, I don't believe that CO2 is a pollutant. But even if we take that for granted, we're doing the best at it.
Yeah.
And we're getting the worst rap for it.
But the way you bring people into the fold is tell people about how horrible it is overseas.
Yeah.
And then look at the regulatory requirements in the country here. We can keep it here. We can just, do whatever people who might be on more misanthropic side of the aisle might be pushing.
Right.
But I completely segued from your question.
We did, and I was going to bring you back to it, which is vaccine COVID-related mandate stuff. And I guess let me say it more specifically. I don't know if other states have done it, but specifically in Florida. Yeah. First of all, the governor passed an executive order or signed an executive order saying that there shall be no vaccine mandates or mask mandates in the state, and then was able to get the legislature to pass it into law. Now, once it's law, that's solid. Executive orders could be thrown out as soon as the next guy comes in or battled very easily in courts. Would you support a federal level ban on vaccine mandates and vaccine passports?
In a lot of ways, I look at masks as, at this point,
and mask mandates.
yeah, I look at our mask at this point as being nothing more than, the little red scarves that my folks had to wear growing up. When it mattered, when this pandemic initially happened, okay, and I'm talking end of 2018 to early 2000s, I was wearing my mask because I had a really bad flu. I was still under orders as an Asian American, and the Asian American community were the ones that were wearing all these masks because we were paying attention to all the hellscape that was happening overseas. I segued into stuff in China to say that their lungs are severely compromised already from the pollution.
Right.
And that's why, even their reported figures are significantly higher in terms of death rates.
Right.
But their control measures, we should have avoided that at all costs. We should have gone the way of Taiwan, and actually Florida kind of went that way by doing public relations. They have this really cute hand thing for washing your hands, this cartoon. But when it mattered, I'm talking January, February, even March 2019, I was wearing my mask because I had a bad flu, because that's just what we do to be polite. We don't want to spread our germs to other people. I was not telling everybody in my office, you all have to wear the mask so you don't get the flu. I was chastised by my retired commanding officer at the time. He's like, "See, why are you doing this weird Asian thing? Or you have that weird bug that's going around?" Trying no, I just have a really bad flu. And I don't want everybody to get it. It's like, well, I saw Fauci on the news
just say that the masks don't do anything.
He's a doctor with the National Health Institute, and he says the masks are useless and don't do anything. And I would say, because of the statements of the people who've been flip-flopping, because of that, we saw incredible surges and harassments in the Asian American community. And people were looking at us sideways, when we were walking grocery. And literally, I had the flu. I just didn't want to get everybody sick. I think that it would have mattered at that time if our government just told the truth. I would support a mandate that would ban mandating people to do things that are basically like a compulsion to speech almost.
So say that without double negatives. So you would support you would support a law that would ban mandates for such things like this.
I would support a law that would ban all lockdown measures.
Okay, that's
towards the direction of anything the CCP or totalitarian regimes around the world are doing. We need to be doing the other thing, and not just because I'm so sick of all the misinformation and the doublespeak and the lying from our political leadership. The research backs this as well. There is a reason that this pandemic, lab origin or not, originated in mainland China.
Yeah.
Research shows that when you have totalitarian regimes compared to free countries, the prevalence of the spread of pandemics and disease is higher. There's a positive correlation between how authoritarian a government is and how disease-prone its population is. And we can talk about things about how big agro and
I've never heard of that, but I 100% believe it, and I'm thinking of the ways in my head right now.
Yeah, and there are 4 other pandemics, including the bubonic plague, that are going around mainland China at the same time. This Bunyan virus that's spread by hares, the bird flu, which is much more lethal than coronavirus, are going around as well. And all these pandemics are circulating. If you want to get into Eastern spirituality, we talk about things like karma and doing things that are right by heaven, just basically being a good citizen to avoid that. And it extends to the government level. And when the population does not hold its rulers accountable, it is punished for that. But I wonder sometimes, because I've become more and more religious over the years,
Christian religious or Eastern religious?
Just religious. I can't really pin down what I am.
Okay.
But I would say probably leaning more towards the Eastern side because that's my religious heritage. But if you look at everything from Buddhism to Taoism to called Yugao, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they all talk about the responsibility of people and rulers. And you wonder, they all kind of push kind of the same message of being a good person. And you see when places stray from that, when they back things that, push a certain collective of folks that have anointed themselves to aristocracy or the party, elected officials in power, like the negative consequences and externalities that come. So I wonder, like, if all of these religions, when they were forming, already knew all of this, because people in ancient times had the same brain structures that we did.
Right.
We're not millions of years of evolution removed from
1,000 years ago.
Ancestors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I guess talk about these forming the religions maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, but
yeah. So huge segue, but basically, yes, no lockdowns of
no
any
mandates.
kind.
Yep.
And the worst part is we are punishing future generations for basically to make elder generations and our generations get this little bit of one-upping the other side of our political opponents.
Yeah.
It's not right by our children. It's not right by our neighbors and our elders. I can tell you, my grandma, who's just turned 100 years old this past Thanksgiving, her birthday coincides with Thanksgiving. She used to walk every day in Atlantic City Boardwalk and go to the beach. And this is a lady who was doing like push-ups into her 80s, and now she's 100. But her cognitive decline since all of this came into effect, and her health decline has been huge. And, she has lived a full life and has many grandchildren, but it's no different for our elders as it is for our children. They need to be out there socializing with people their age and older and just seeing and exploring the world, feeling things, building up their immune systems by getting sick. And we should be very grateful that this pandemic is not that the CCP virus or
I don't care what you call it.
Yeah,
there's one semantic I don't care about that much.
Yeah, I confuse that with the lockdown. Is not affecting. So the disease is not the disease. The physical disease is not affecting our children as much as the mental disease that we've all adopted in kind of anointing these people who say they're our betters.
I 100% agree. Great. Well, I want to ramp this up, but before I did, I wanted to ask you, was there anything that you wanted to say that we didn't cover before doing that?
Oh my gosh.
He's flipping through his notes.
Yeah, you can see the stack of stuff. This was the idea of this was to condense all my scatterbrain thoughts, and I don't think it was very successful.
Well,
but I did want to say one thing. Okay, little known non-secret is over the pandemic, the American people at large, many of us accumulated in aggregate 17 trillion in savings. And I've said on my social media that you can bet the tax man wants a part of that. I want that money to go back into American citizens, to stay in people's savings for a nest egg, for emergency, for whatever. And these things that are being discussed on the Hill about like tracking people's financial transactions over $600 and tying that into the Federal Reserve System, that is literally the central bank digital currency stuff that the cryptocurrency folks are so scared of, and they're so scared of it for a reason, because if you can track that, if you can track people's transactions at that level,
you know exactly what they're doing.
Yes. Yeah. Do you really want the same government that took power over 9/11 and never rolled back the Patriot Act, never rolled back all of these authorities that we've granted them, and have never given the power back to the people, to get more and more power via these mandates and via these lockdowns and et cetera and et cetera? Or can you trust your friends and neighbors to do the right thing? And I think we as Americans, I would encourage people to go out and door knock it and meet their friends and neighbors as well. They can contact me via my website. And
I was going to say, please plug your how to get a hold of you, or how to support you.
Well, my website is just cforliberty.com. Literally, my first name is C, and I'm a sailor.
SEA, C, not like C short for something.
There's a story behind that, but it's not for now. But I did not change my name when I went in the maritime, and it's For Liberty, just no numbers, no anything, just cforliberty.com. They can find my email in there. They can join as a volunteer. They can walk around and meet our neighbors with me, and they will find that overwhelmingly we are all on the same page. We're all on one team. one dream, one America. And that America does not want the government to track all of our financial transactions.
Yeah.
And there's so much of the economy that people depend upon, let alone some of these people that are disenfranchised and literally sleeping with their face in the gutters that I've seen campaigning in our area out here, who depend on kind of that informal economy. The government does not help anybody when they're tracking these transactions other than themselves and the people that plan to create these big political non-solutions, like let's create another political entity that will do this or that and will solve all our problems.
That will further deplete everybody's rights.
All we need to do is create another Department of Homeland Security. That's all we need to do to fix everything.
Right. Right. 3 or 4 times. Yes. That'll fix everything after the 7th or 8th time. Yeah.
But thank you for having me. Sorry
great.
For rambling on.
No. I wanted to give you a chance to express yourself as you feel that you want to express yourself, and have everybody give a chance to hear it. So, I really appreciate you coming on, and this has been Dylan Moore with I Read It TV, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.